Live. Neat. Awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Vittoria Benzine. I am a street art journalist with this magazine here. Whoa. Up magazine. And I'm also a personal essayist based out of Brooklyn. Yes, thank you. Thank you. I hope that you mean my delivery there and not the food service. But anyways, I'm here in my bedroom. Hi, Yellow. How are you? So nice to see everybody. I'm just sitting in my bedroom with an elevator. And, I did my makeup a cool 30 seconds ago, but I'm really excited for this opportunity to read with Left Bank today. I think that this event is so amazing. It's a way to connect people and also expose people to new artists that they might not have seen otherwise. And this essay that I prepared for you all today has been germinating in my head since I got my tattoo about 2 weeks ago. I got my first and only tattoo, this tiger. I wanted it for a really long time since I quit drinking to symbolize, all the tenacity that I showed in stopping. Yeah, right? It's real. So I really wanted this for an extremely long time, but I never felt that I was tough enough. And I had a long ass winter. It beat me down so hard that eventually I was just like, you know what? I definitely am tough enough. And I was like, I'm going to seize my life. Thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to start reading this piece. It's called A Harder, More Difficult Way. I think that the reason for that will become evident soon enough. And I would also like to thank my roommate, Hetty, who is here to be my live studio audience. Woo. So here we go. Hello. I was 13 when Slumdog Millionaire hit theaters and swept the nation. That was the spring I fell in love with Dev Patel. My love has always been too big, too restless, and uncomfortable. It needs action a simple poster on the bedroom wall can't provide. My love likes research, which at age 13 translated into my obsession with Bollywood choreography. That spring, I taught my entire middle school volleyball team the dance to Jai Ho. We practiced in a pizzeria parking lot after an away game and performed it at the season's pep rally. That was the last time in my life I would experience infatuation without the accessories of my latent alcoholism. Brown eyes and brown liquors have joined forces to fill the God-shaped hole in my heart ever since. Brown Eyes took the stage for their solo performance in over a decade when I tumbled into lust last fall, the first true obsession of my sobriety. My love is rare and star-crossed, symptomatic of a worldview shrouded in drama. I believe that life should be a symphony and nothing less. This belief is possibly the greatest psychological force inhibiting my ability to put the bottle down before my knees give out. When that drunk feeling starts to swell, when everything the strangers are saying seems both impressive and urgent, only then am I saved from the disappointing monotony of daily life, of the groceries and gas bills and customers I'm forced to smile for. The drinking and its subsequent accessories, weed, uppers, club drugs, and hallucinogens, all of which became increasingly prevalent throughout my active addiction spanning 17 to 22, didn't always yield soprano highs. There were molto alto lows, canticle depressions, sobbing to strangers. Even the moments I slurred lamentations that regular life just didn't work for me lent a poetic sheen to my otherwise flat, dank depression. Throughout those 5 years, I justified Eccles' choice by deeming it material for the work I'd someday write. Throughout those 5 years, I wrote nothing, saved for coked up prose unpalatable to my eyes today. What's the border between mental illness and creativity? Why is one vilified where the other is glorified? It seems to me that it comes down to productivity. I was a drag on the GDP, idling in substance abuse's twilight torpor, but now I profit off those experiences by synthesizing them into essays. I'm no longer a damaged heap in the eyes of the masses. I'm a working artist. Deviation from the norm will be punished unless it can be exploited, as they say. Here's the addict's age-old paradox. Do I abuse because I'm hopeless, or does the abuse render me hopeless? Both answers are right. It's a quintessential vicious cycle. I didn't get sober to stall the exponential expansion of my misery. I quit drinking on December 16th, 2017 because I was damn near broke from it. It had choked my hopeful writing career before I'd finished one coherent piece. I could feel the years preparing to transform into dust. With one simple move, an effort of abstinence, I sought to seize my destiny and avoid the shameful return to my hometown in rural PA, tail sheepishly between my legs. Well-being be damned, I wanted to be rich and famous, or at least not lose to myself miserably. Hi, Tanya. My first try failed after 7 months for reasons that would turn this essay into a novel. Suffice it to say, my insecurity that sobriety turned me stale consumed me whole. Suffice it to say that on the second go, I got sober by attending 90 AA meetings in 90 days. This was the recommended dosage for my spiritual malady. At the first meeting, the chairperson introduced themselves and asked me to read the opening statement that would kick off our group's meeting. I gave him a watery smile and said, I won't be able to do this without crying, I promise. It's the only time in my life I've ever turned down an opportunity to publicly speak. This newfound family held my hand when I couldn't utter the phrase, my name is Vittoria and I'm an alcoholic, without breaking down. My fellows offered an unconditional love my parents had never learned how to give, and applauded each new day clean that I accumulated. I need you to understand why then, after AA did all this for me, I stopped going to meetings shortly after achieving 100 days. I didn't want to go to AA anymore because I had no intention to work the 12 steps, which aim to lead addicts to a life lived the easier, softer way. I do not want to become a better person, do not want to wear life like a loose garment. With my fetish for pain, I wanted to know what suffering felt like without blunting my senses. I longed to tread the harder, more difficult way. Alcoholism relieved me from 18 years defined by the diminutive label cute. The narrative I'd been told by parents, peers, and teachers throughout my youth was dependent. I was too innocent, too pure, naive, or pretty to properly care for myself. My dad promised I was prissy. Only I had knowledge of what those 5 years spent drinking and drugging in New York City had subjected me to. I knew I was freshly dirtied and hardened. Sober for the second time, I opted to embrace this. I wanted to live life like a girl who'd kissed the brink because she no longer feared it might harm her. I wanted to write from that place so others who hadn't suffered so viscerally could understand their own latent strength as well. I met a man in his late 30s shortly after my decision to quit AA, and for the next 8 months almost felt like the rebellion I'd been searching for. Because he himself was completely uninterested in drinking, I came to lean on him for my sobriety through the violent crying bouts that followed while I mourned my loss of identity. When I finally accepted I was no longer a grifter, no longer the girl who could find pride in drinking anybody under the table, being with the man in his late 30s began to feel like the end of a future that hadn't even begun. I started to want my freedom back. I wanted space to find out what being this new self with new peace might feel like. Theretofore, I'd all askew. Like fate, the only force that could inspire swift action snatched my attention into its bony fist. I met a 72-year-old married man and fell in love with him. There was the painful sensation of all that breaking, sure, which still mars and haunts my happiness to this day 6 months later. However, there was also a thrilling liberation. If I'd been preserving my moral ambiguity for one moment, it was this. Though our affair never materialized. He pansied out over the final hour over what I considered the feeble excuse that he didn't want to destroy his wife and family. Left without closure, my worldview and staunch belief in fate crumbled, threatening to bring my self-esteem and the will to write with it. Clear enough, because fame and fortune are worthless without an audience. The day I met this older man, my writing engines began firing at full speed. Not only did the feelings he sparked in me provide a new spring of inspiration, but he himself provided an entity to prove to succeed for. I knocked out 1/3 of a novel and accepted assignments with enhanced vigor. My desire for solace found itself at war against my creative impulse to milk these feelings for all they were worth. I actively chose the latter because in sobriety, with all its responsibility and relative monotony, I was bored and frightened by the more explored well of experience. Months passed, but his memory refused to fade. When the wound was at its most raw, around Christmas time, I played a game with myself on the occasions where fate found me with a few spare minutes in a nearby bookstore. I'd meander the shop's floor and loosely time how long it took me to find the book. In the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's, Holly Golightly tells Paul Varjak that she shoplifts to keep herself sharp. I was like that, impish and light-footed, practicing some kind of petty thievery. Who I was stealing what from, I haven't discerned. Jackson the night I gussied up and finally bought the book. McNally Jackson plays a fateful role in my personal mythology. It's where I met my editor, T.K. Mills, around the day I achieved my first 6 months sober. Hi. That was the day I made the first push towards my present writing career by attending. Mills walked by and threw a lingering glance in my direction. That guy's gonna hit on me, I laughed to myself. He asked to use my lighter. At that time, I was just an aspiring street art journalist. TK told me he was an established street art journalist. He was the first person who encouraged me to overcome my fears of inadequacy. He promised my writing showed talent and potential. Today, we are so close that he was the one who gone through periods of major depression on several other occasions since I gained full reign of my consciousness at 13. This was the first major depression I went through where I didn't binge eat. I didn't drown my sorrows in alcohol. I understood these things wouldn't help. Still, I wanted to work through the pain instantaneously. Enough of my love to sustain several men, I was getting under several every week. I mean, I was hauling my bed sheets to the laundromat every Thursday. I'm much harder to get close to than I'd once hoped was the case. Furthermore, this obsession wasn't the kind of thing I could overcome with cheek or verve. This love was, in my own convoluted way, quite real. That made me respect it more, but it made the pain deeper. I knew I would have to change on a structural level to resolve it. 4 days after contracting my yeast infection, I received the call that my aunt had passed away. This was only the second death I'd ever dealt with in my life. The first came at 17 when a close classmate of mine died suddenly, alone, in a private practice room at our high school while playing trombone. My aunt's death was long, slow, and foreseeable. Her alcohol abuse became evident 6 years prior when she was arrested for a DUI with her children in the car. Shortly after I first got sober, I had gone home to practice some evangelism. Over lunch, when my aunt asked me what was new in my life, I casually mentioned that I'd quit drinking. She showed surprise, even a timid curiosity, but the desire never took to her like it did to me. Then, in December 2019, her organs failed. 2 nights later, the insufferable itchiness from my infection woke me up in the middle of the night. I limped to the bathroom to sit on the toilet, the only position which offered a moment's respite. I sat there leaning my head against the tile wall, deciding if I could fall asleep like that or if my roommates would find me and fear I'd died like Elvis. I think that thought in particular of a drowsy roommate discovering me slumped over the crapper broke something in my misery. I fixed my gaze on the trash can nearby, gritted my teeth, and told myself this has got to be as bad as it gets. And as it turns out, I was right. My pain was never so visceral after that. She didn't know. A new need begged me to externalize my internal strife. During the month of February, I got 4 piercings and 1 10-inch tattoo I'd wanted to symbolize my sobriety since December 2017. I became freshly obsessed with the rapid conversion of idea into action. Everything felt very pertinent in February. I was forgetting the sound of his voice, and the book only slightly helped. Every word I wrote sang like a potential swan song. See, I'm a glutton for emotional pain, but I detest the physical. I figured getting the tattoo would be one more thing to overcome. I'd wanted to finish the book about the septuagenarian before beginning, but I still had 30 pages left when my appointment began. I read while my executioner prepped his station. Unable to withstand the mounting anxiety over the pain I'd so soon encounter, I asked the artist if he'd like something from the bodega. "Just a Red Bull," he replied. The people I knew who boasted impressive collections of ink likened the process of being tattooed to a religious experience. They became addicted to the pain, and its incessant droll proved a meditative experience. Forever on the search for profundity, I wondered if it'd be the same for me. Forced orgasms had once been described to me the same way. The night that TK and I had dinner for the first time to discuss our prospective writing careers, I told him that I had to leave early because I had a sugar daddy who promised to give me $40 extra if I made it to his hotel before 11. That night, I arrived to the financial district barely before the deadline to receive my cash bonus and an extra present, a Hitachi Magic Wand vibrator. It is the first and only sex toy I've ever owned. Aaron told me he was going to hold it on me until I couldn't handle the sensation anymore, and then he would keep it there even longer. "I think you're going to learn a lot about yourself," he smiled in an attempt to assure me. I found that men were always trying to disguise their desires as learning opportunities. At 22, I was prone to waves of sexual guilt after orgasm. This experience forced me to overcome that guilt, and I toured new emotions as I made my way through the 6 orgasms that followed. I started as a child distraught at disappointing her parents. I ended as parent to myself, boasting authority over my own domain. Light from the Freedom Tower poured in through the room's window, and I gazed at the magnificent edifice, wondering how in the world I got to that place in that moment. I pushed the memory from my head and stepped into the gas station convenience store 2 blocks away, assaulted by its familiar smell, which I'd come to know from 4 years of purchasing 6-packs and grapefruit IPA and 30 racks of Rolling Rock from that very place. One thing that I probably should have mentioned is that the tattoo shop where I was having this done was actually very close to my college, where I lived out 4 years of my strongest drinking and drug addictions. I used to spend the summers between college semesters on campus, toiling for hours at my work-study job to fund unpaid internships and my incessant partying. I looked around the store for its owner, Toothless Billy, who once poured vodka into my Four Loko while we leaned against the hood of his Honda. No such luck. I smiled at the cashier, miraculously, without launching into a soliloquy, and headed back to the tattoo shop I'd stumbled by so many times. Final bolstering minutes before the procedure, I smoked an American Spirit and sipped my own Red Bull while gazing upon the dorm building I'd lived in my sophomore year. That was easily the most contentious of the 4 I spent earning my bachelor's. The Chinese girl I'd been randomly paired with as a roommate left soon after I returned home blackout drunk a week or 2 into the semester, blathering on about how I hoped we could be like family. "By the way, you snore a lot," she said before slamming the door on her way out. I lived alone for the next 2 weeks. I liked living alone because I could drink without judgment. My new friend Tammy and I went out for a night that started with white wine and proceeded into white powder. We made new friends and talked nonsense until the sun came up, at which point I confided that I wanted to mix cocaine and weed like the Kendrick Lamar lyric, "He's been mixing shit since the 80s. 6 a.m. is not an optimum hour for decision making. Tammy agreed anyway, and we headed to the dorm where she served as an RA to retrieve her pipe. There, we bumped into her boss, the residential director, and Tammy gleefully told her our plan for the morning. "That's cool that you can be so open with her," I giggled as we sparked the snowball on our school's quad. My friendship, because soon after I met my undergraduate sweetheart, a poet and fellow burgeoning alcoholic. From where I stood smoking that American Spirit before my tattoo, I could see the lounge where I'd admitted I cheated on him with a coworker at my new internship. That itself had only happened about a half a mile from where I was having the recollection, at a motel near 187th Street that offered hourly rates. I remember the way that guy had worked at me for hours without being able to come, probably guilt-ridden over his unwitting girlfriend at home. I wasn't interested in his pleasure or mine. Sex like that was never about pleasure. It was about the experience itself, forcing me to stomach my worst inclinations. Such was the purpose of having my tattoo done in this particular place. It was a solo homage to the fact that I was turning 25 and had so far successfully endured the challenge of being myself. Reticent to put my face on the pleather massage table where I'd received my tattoo, I absentmindedly used the book as a pillow. The whole process took just over 3 hours. The first half, where the artist drew the lines, hardly made a dent in my capacity to withstand. However, the color was a different story. He scraped at my back with a 6-pronged razor, painting my skin like a canvas. I smashed my face into the book, foundation streaking its cover. Eventually, the final stage came, and my artist added white highlights using a satanic device, a fine double-pronged needle dipped in white. Raw, exhausted, adrenaline depleted, I don't think I've ever withstood a sensation like that. I turned the pain sexual in order to cope. Cradling the book like a child does their teddy bear, I spread my legs wide and imagined my septuagenarian railing me from behind. I whispered his name into the makeup-stained cover of the book I'd bought about him. I wanted to get the tattoo alone for the same reason I wanted to finish the book before I had it done. I didn't want to associate my milestone with anyone else. It was for me, the sole individual who'd witnessed every journey of my own endurance. Cradling the book, lips smashed into its cover, I couldn't fret over the moment's implications. First of all, it was just too damn late. Second, I knew that no matter what life brings, no matter how circumstances shift, this is the central nougat from which all future me's will spring. I'll always get the point. 6 months. Can you believe it? My greatest question throughout this false love has always been, yeesh, how long does this shit last? Followed by, why can't I make this go away? And then the most damning of all, the true concern, do I even want this to go away? Roommate says yes, I don't know. This is evidently not the instance I will learn to squash obsession. I know that moving on from one person by tumbling for another merely postpones the actual development I need, but that's probably what will happen. With the tattoo done and my back swathed in saran wrap, I trudged to the D train like I had many times before, en route to internships and parties. I thought if I'd been dropped there with acute amnesia, it would have been another night in college. If I remember the taste of that cardboard cover in my mouth when I'm older, I'll probably laugh rather than cringe. I don't regret every blackout I had on those forsaken Belmont streets. I don't regret letting Aaron convince me the magic wand is for my own good. They were all just things that I endured. That night, alone and aching, I gave myself permission to finish the book later, to let the dance last. So, that was the essay that I've been working on ceaselessly for the past 36 hours. I really wasn't sure if I should read it because it was horrible. It was so difficult to write. Let me show you guys. It's very, very hard to write when the entire world is suffering so much, but I've never seen the world suffer so much. My process in this situation was to write out approximately 5,000 words of incoherent bullshit and then scribble onto the page to make it readable, in case you're interested in what goes into actually writing these things. By way of compensation for me, I really don't need any payments on my Venmo or anything like that. The most meaningful thing that I would appreciate if you would go to my website. I'll type out my name here and put it in the chat, and read my work and let me know what you think, because I do write predominantly for myself, but I also really, really hope to help people. And if you find yourself with a lot of time while you're in quarantine, moving forward. Next up on the Left Bank Live Music Festival will be Sea Life. So give it up for them, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Bye.